Hi everyone, Josh here, and this is my review of Battle Los Angeles. Now, this movie has had a huge marketing campaign. Clearly, this is the first big tentpole movie of the year, March being the new start of summer, apparently, ever since 300 at least. And like I said, it's had actually a really good marketing campaign, I think, and because specifically, I think this marketing campaign tells you exactly what you're going to get in the movie. You see a commercial, you see military fighting aliens, and you see some kind of shaky cam action. You know what? That's basically what you're going to get. This is no Independence Day, although it is much the same plot line. But this is no Independence Day in that the scope is not as large. While the Earth is being attacked, it is focused solely on this one squad in Los Angeles. And so some people, I think, might be disappointed by the contained nature of the story. However, this movie is made for $70 million, and that's actually a really good... they must have saved a real lot of money on this. You can tell in a few aspects, but I'll get into that later. To start, though, the story is basically what any military science fiction story is. Alien intruder attacks Earth in some form or fashion, see Starship Trooper, see Independence Day, etc., etc., and humans have to strike back, and of course, in the end, I really don't think this is a huge spoiler, manage to overcome them. Hoorah. Now, this is a movie, like I said, if you go into it with the right expectations, I think you'll have a lot of fun. It's not the best movie, it's clearly just meant as popcorn entertainment, but I actually think it excels in a few areas that are worth noting, and while some people could find fault with it, and again I will go into that, I do think the good outweighs the bad. Like I said, the story is very predictable, a little choppy, pace-wise though it actually works out quite nicely. If you take in mind the perspective that you're going through, it really gives you a sense of being there, because there's an actual sense of time kept throughout this movie. It's really neat. It starts, in the morning, goes to the afternoon, goes to the night, goes to the next day kind of thing, and it feels like it's almost like a siege, and I really appreciate that, because, Battle Los Angeles, if I'm focusing on the military, makes it feel more like a military operation, and that level of preciseness that you get. As for the characters, though, that's another story. For one thing, I had trouble telling them apart, and I'm not someone who has this problem very often, to be perfectly honest, but there is one actor whose brother was killed by got killed in action with under the former commander's rule, and then there is a doctor who looks very similar to him. I can tell him apart for the most part, but then there was one other guy who gets killed early on in the movie who looks exactly like both of them, and there's kind of two younger recruits that I got confused as well. They try to introduce them, they really do. They tell you their names right below them as they're introducing them. A little clunky, but I guess it works. Or it could work, they say. And like I said, they really do try and introduce them, but it just doesn't work. There's way too many characters, and I understand this is kind of unfortunate because, if you have a squad, you need to have a certain amount of people. You just can't have 4 people going into an alien war zone. But at the same time, I feel it would have been better in the end if they had just kind of left the others to be nameless fodder, even if you knew they were going to die because of it. That said, there was a few people, yeah, I did appreciate that a lot of the people you thought would have died maybe didn't die, and then vice versa. Not too surprising, but it does add a little tension to the mix. The only character I really cared about, though, is the main character. There was one kid that's introduced, who's like a child, is introduced, who I felt bad for, but I mean, the main character is the only one that really does anything. And even his motivations are pretty scantily outlined. But this is not what you go to see Battle LA for. So let's just skip past this. Frankly, it's kind of a mute aspect. Characters are not very good. As far as the effects and design, though, this is what probably a lot of people are going for. Like I said, this movie did cost $70 million, and unfortunately you can tell the CG is not the best sometimes, and particularly while it is fluid, it seems kind of a little grainy, and I realize that could have been part of the picture, but at the same time, it seemed like the technology wasn't quite as well defined. Now, I'm not expecting every movie to be $200 million, Transformers-esque movies where the animation is perfect on every little notch or whatever. The only thing that movie is really good for. But it did look a little choppy at times. That said though, I was not let down by it in too many circumstances. One in particular I was let down by, though, was they were in this neighborhood one time and it's foggy. And fog is really cheap, in my opinion, especially when you're in this kind of situation. It just seemed, I don't know, like you're obscuring them very, very obviously, and it struck me as very poor. But anyway, What I did really enjoy, though, was the actual design of the aliens. And I'm kind of two-faced about this, because on one hand, the actual aliens themselves are fairly generic. In fact, they just look like humanoids, but with plate heads. But their actual technology, I thought, was very interesting to watch function, because it seemed very gritty, for lack of a better word. I kind of hate that word, but it really does fit here. The engines of their like things are always kind of kicking in and out. They always seem and like they have this version of the tank, which is kind of unsteady and doesn't really function quite as well as they should have, or quite as well as it should, or you think it would. And I really like that aspect. That made them it made them a little interesting. You've seen a lot of these movies, again, Independence Day being a prime example, that where they have laser beams and all the technology is perfectly cylindrical. And I realize that this stems out of a certain design choices made earlier, made in the 1980s, H.R. Geiger's things, very whatever. But I've kind of grown tired of it, so to speak. These aliens, if I were to say anything, resemble more the ones in District 9, not in shape, but I mean in actual style. They don't really talk a whole lot, there's no characterization given to them, but there's a lot said about them that's interesting that I'm not going to go into, I don't want to spoil it, but there is a lot about them that I find interesting. They themselves made for cool villains. I would have liked a little more variety in them. You only see a couple. But at the same time, the movie is not particularly long, so I feel that for what the time they did have, they were characterized fairly nicely. What more can I say? Like I said, even though the effects were a little grainy or blurry or fuzzy on occasion, I think it kind of fit this down and dirty image, if that makes any sense. Maybe that's just me. Lastly, though, the sound is actually quite nice, too. Outside of just the whole Sonic experience, which is, you know, as you'd expect from a larger action movie, quite good, the music, more specifically, I thought actually stood out. And just to clarify here, my idea of good music is something that doesn't intrude in the movie, but at the same time that it enhances the movie experience, you notice it and enjoy it for what it is simultaneously, if that makes any sense. I mean, music can either be so downplayed or so generic that you don't even notice it, so whether that be good or not, maybe that's up to other people's opinion, but I really dislike that, because I feel if you're not even noticing the music, then what's the point? On the other hand, you can have really gregarious music, which sometimes works. Inception, I think, was a really great example of this, as Hans Zimmer score. But I often find movies like this where it's just either too loud in the mix, or it's just way overplayed for what's going on. And this, I thought, struck a nice balance. And like I said, there is kind of the jingoistic vibe to this movie, and the whole, as you'd expect from, you know, a USA versus Aliens movie. But the music definitely followed suit with that, but I think it was pretty good. It was pretty good. I was noticing it as I was watching, and it also enhanced my experience. It didn't distract me from the movie as well. So definitely good stuff there. Overall, you know what? I would suggest Battle LA if you're looking for a big action tentpole and you want to see some military fight some aliens. What more can I say? This is exactly what it promises to be. It may not be the best of its kind, but frankly, military science fiction is actually a fairly rare thing, especially on a larger scale, so this is interesting to see. I would actually like the subgenre to be elevated a little, and I would suggest Battle LA. Go see it. It's not particularly violent, although there is one part that's kind of random. Otherwise, this is a good way to start the summer season.